In this video, I'm going to teach you how to quickly and easily paint an Avenger Strike fighter from the Aeronautica Imperialis game by Games Workshop.
Scifiwargamers.
Greetings, hobby fans. My name's Marcel, and it's my mission to help you explore the hobby. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I painted my Aeronautica Imperialis Avenger Strike fighters. Hence I have my genuine faux leather flying jacket left over from when we were filming Top Gun 2 the other month. So for my scheme, I decided to go for an almost Pacific era World War II kind of look with a bit of blue. It looks a little bit like the fighters from the Midway movie, if you've seen that. Anyway, let's jump in and I'll show you how I painted it.
So here are all the paints I've used for this project. All of them should be readily available from your hobby shops. I've also used a snake. He likes to accompany me on these painting adventures. Say hello, bee. So to start with, I've primed the miniature, and this time, which makes a bit of a change for me, I've gone for a grey primer. I've put this on with an airbrush, but you can use an aerosol can if you so fancy. So the first colour I'm going to apply is Vallejo Game Colour Magic Blue. And this is a lovely colour. I'm giving all the models a good coat of this colour using a big old brush, which I don't really care about if I wreck. I gave him a couple of thin coats of this. You should end up with a model that looks like this at this stage. When that's dry, I did a 50-50 mix of Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade and Lamian Medium and made a wash, and I've washed all over all the blue areas. Now absolutely make sure this wash is 100% dry for the next stage, or you will be making a big mess. Anyway, when that's done, it should look a bit like this. So when it's dry, we're going to apply the same blue again using a heavy dry brush, or you might want to call it an overbrush. And we're just gonna dry brush the entire miniature and put it back on the stand when it pops off. You should have something that ends up looking a bit like this, with the nice wash still left in the recesses. Now for a highlight, I'm going to use a light blue, in this case Vallejo model colour, Deep Sky Blue, and give this a slightly lighter dry brush all over the miniature. And when I say lighter, I mean both with pressure and colour. When that's done, you should have something that looks a bit like this. Ignore my blue thumb and crack out your white. I'm going with Vallejo model colour white. And I'm giving it a really light dry brush all over the miniature with this white colour. Now interestingly, my brush is still a bit dirty from the previous blue colour, which knocks back the starkness of that white a little. When you're done, you'll have something that looks like this, and all that detail has been nicely highlighted. Then we're going to go back to Deep Sky Blue, and we're going to paint a wiggly line halfway down the fuselage. And then we're going to paint the entire bottom of the plane. When that's dry, you should have something that looks like this. Marvellous. Now, mix these two colours together, using mostly white. I'm using Corax white for this one. And about halfway down your previous step, paint another wiggly line and fill in the bottom of your plane. This probably needs a couple of thin coats to get a nice strong white colour. When that's done, it should look like this. Now we're going to tidy up some mistakes from that colour, so I'm going back again to Magic Blue and just using the side of my brush to paint the edges of the wings where the two colours kind of overlapped and got a bit messy. If you were tidier on the previous stage, you probably won't have to do this, but I wasn't. And here we go again, we're back to Drakenhof, Nightshade and Lamian Medium, but this time we're putting a tiny bit of Drakenhof Nightshade in, probably a 1 to 10 mix, and we're giving all the white areas a wash with this. We've pretty much made something that looks like Apothecary White here, so you might be able to use that. When that's done, it should look a bit like this. Now wait for that to dry 100%, and then we're going to go in and paint some metal parts. And I'm using Vallejo Model Air Gunmetal. And I'm going to paint all the metal parts, such as the engines, the weapons, that brilliant weapon on the bottom there, the Avenger Bolt Cannon, best weapon in the game, the little metal bits on the wings, and you should have something that looks like this. Now we're going to shade the metal, and we're going to use my still almost empty Citadel Nuln Oil. Make sure you give it a good shake. And we're going to liberally apply this wash to all the metal parts of the miniature. Like we said before, the weapons, and the engines, and the other metal bits. And it should look a bit like this. Don't forget to paint that rear firing stubber gun on the top. Now we're going to paint a couple of little gold details. I'm using Citadel Retributor armor for this, and I'm going to paint the little Aquila on the front of the fuselage and the little pipes on top of the engines there, which I've previously painted silver, but I wanted a little bit more visual interest, as you can see here. Now we're going to shade and enrich the gold with Citadel Reichland Flesh Shade, and just give these a good wash over on the gold parts. As they're so small, we won't even have to bother highlighting these again, saving us a few more minutes. I think that looks wonderful. Next up, we're going to use a white paint, and again this time I'm going to use Corax White, and I'm going to very gently paint some white banding around the fuselage, taking my time to get these lines straight, and I'm also going to paint the missiles white as well. There you go. This is probably the hardest part of the miniature, painting those white bands. And then if you remember before, we shaded our white, didn't we? And we're going to do that again with the same mix, but we're just going to try and apply it to the crevices this time on that white band, but we can give the missiles an all-over wash. When that's done, it should look a bit like this. Some nice contrast in there. Next up, Citadel Mephiston Red, or any red that you fancy. And we're just going to paint the tips of the missiles. Everyone needs red tips because they look fantastic. I guess you could paint your missile tips a different colour, but I thought red would look lovely. There you go. Marvellous. Look at those hell strikes. They look incredible. Now we're going to go back to our white again. We're going to paint in the windows. Again, this is where we have to be very careful. I thin it down a bit to make it sort of run into the crevices. But you don't want to make it so thin as it just goes everywhere. Patience is key here. When that's done, it should look a little bit like this. Now to shade the windows and give them that armoured glass look, I'm going to give them a little thinned wash of Coelia green shade, or Coelia, however you pronounce it. I'll let that dry, then apply a couple more washes just into the corners. When that's dry, you should have something that looks like this. If it goes wrong, you can reapply the white and reapply your shade. Now to finish up the windows, I'm going to add some thinned dots of white to the centre of the windows. These could be reflections of cloud perhaps, or just brighter parts of the windows. They add a nice piece of contrast.
So there you go. All I did was add a few decals and glossed those windows afterwards to give them a shiny window look. If you want to see more Aeronautica Imperialis videos, you can click the playlist up here somewhere. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. That means you, Chris. As always, thank you very much for watching, and always remember to drill your barrels.